Every hour of every day, another middle-class Canadian cartwheels into the bottomless abyss of homelessness. The causes are myriad, but there is only one reason why this is happening to our fellow Canadians. Governments at all levels have acquiesced to the agenda of the dominant elite that is currently striving to transform Canada into a two-class society consisting of the ruling elite and those who serve them. It's frightening how many homeless people I've run into recently who were once living a secure middle-class life. More and more members of the middle class are losing their jobs and everything they have worked a lifetime to accumulate. On a recent visit to a homeless shelter, I was struck by the change in the type of residents I found there. One would expect to find the stereotypical bum, down and out and suffering from addictions, just like I was for many years. But surprise, surprise, nearly half of them were recently successful members of the middle class who still carried cell phones and dressed in middle-class style, making them indistinguishable from your next-door neighbor, or you for that matter. They must find it a terrifying experience, sleeping 3 feet away on all 4 sides from other homeless people in a room with 100 other unfortunates, and waking up scratching numerous bed-bug bites. Most shelters are full to capacity with a long waiting list. You can't just walk in and ask for a bed. You will be told they are fully booked and the waiting list is full too. You will be sent to a shelter referral center at 129 Peter Street, where they will enter you into the City of Toronto homeless database and begin calling shelters until they find a bed for you. The processing of the individual is dehumanizing and intrusive, and many homeless people remain outside rather than submit to it. The bed they locate may be far away in the suburbs, but don't worry, they will give you a subway token to get there. When you arrive, before you are shown to a bed, you will be required to once again show your ID and answer a number of personal questions which will be entered into their computer. When you wake up in the morning, you will be given a decent breakfast and told to leave the premises and not return until the evening meal about 4:30. So you leave and find yourself in a strange neighborhood, far from anything familiar, and no subway token to get back to familiar territory. It doesn't matter what the weather is like. You're on your own for the whole day. Hope your survival instincts are strong. You're going to need them. Welcome to the new alternative housing plan for the declining middle class. You may think it's only temporary, but ask your neighbors in the shelter and they will speak of the many months they have lived like this. I haven't determined when hope vanishes and acceptance of this as a permanent condition sets in. But eventually, daily shaving is abandoned for the men and makeup becomes a memory for the women. You forsake the effort to maintain the illusion that you are still a member of the middle class, for you are not and may never be again. Eventually you turn to drugs, for therein lies the only relief from the feeling of failure and exclusion from society that somehow is your own damn fault. For that is what you thought of homeless people when you had a home. Now you're one of us. Welcome to the real world. So you know, I was once a member of the upper middle class myself, with a net worth of over $1 million. But don't take my word for what you're hearing. Let's talk to some other people who were once part of the middle class and lost everything. You don't have to look far to find them. They're all over town, sleeping on sidewalks, in shelters, or couch surfing to get by. Our first interview is with Tamara. She's one of the lucky ones who managed to keep her family together, barely, and is now living on social assistance with her husband and 4 children in a 2-bedroom apartment.
I spent a certain amount of time homeless last year. Myself and my family were evicted on my eldest son's 18th birthday. We ended up living in the motel down at the Knight's Inn, which is where social services houses families.
How many children do you have?
I have 4. My husband and I have been together for 21 years.
Oh, how old was your youngest one at the time?
Lucas was 3 weeks shy of 8.
Wow, that's been really hard on you.
Well, I don't even know if we've seen how hard it has been exactly. What ended up happening was my husband and I spent that first night alone together in this motel. And I've never been so frightened in my life because I was separated from everything, all my possessions, my kids, and I slept with a knife under the pillow that night. Like, I've never felt so disconnected. My husband consulted for an ad agency in Toronto. As business started to dry up and we kept trying to get things back up and it just wouldn't take. And we haven't been on social services yet by this point. So we spent 6 months separated from the eldest kids. That was very traumatic. And, work dries up, things happen, and next thing you know, we're losing the house. So 6 months at Kev's parents, we came back to Oshawa, and that's when into the spring of 2007, and that's when we got on social services. The separation was very, very hard for us. Not only do we have the 4 kids in our family that we've worked very hard to maintain, because a 21-year relationship isn't easy to keep. A lot of people by this point would have run screaming for the hills. I know a lot of women would have run screaming for the hills because I see that all the time.
I was going to say, it's so common for a man when he suffers his trauma of homelessness that together with losing his home, he also loses his family.
His entire family. And I don't think that's right. Like, a lot of people have questioned my loyalty to my husband, and the thing is that's necessary. I won't give that up for anything. We're nearly impossible to deal with at social services too because they can't outsmart us.
Yeah.
Right? They do put people through a rigmarole to get benefits and all the rest of it.
The way they've structured the Ontario Works program, it's futile what they put you through. If there isn't a job out there making you spend money that they don't give you,
yeah,
to go chasing after a job that doesn't exist just so you can keep getting the pittance that isn't enough anyhow.
I actually last week was being put through yet another kind of 3-ring circus over getting benefits kind of thing. And I kind of dawned on me that, you know what, it's easier to go out into the streets and beg for money than it is to deal with this. It's less exhausting. You could be working with someone who's homeless right now because there are people who are working who are homeless.
Right.
And that's another thing. When you don't look like you need help, people don't offer you help, right? So
and the pride thing makes it so that you don't want
ask
to look
for
like
help.
you need it.
Yeah.
But we see homeless people sleeping on the streets is one thing. They're obvious. But for every one that you see sleeping on the streets, you probably have a dozen that are hidden homeless, living, sleeping on
Couch
somebody's
surfing.
couch or in a car.
We couch surfed for a bit because after they took the kids, they didn't have to house us in the motel anymore. They only had them for 6 weeks. But those 6 weeks were... I can't even begin to tell you how devastating. I never expected them to actually take the kids. I was so shocked you could have blown me right over. And it was despicable. The landlord had gotten his notice against us and such, and we got our notice that the sheriff was coming. So I called Ontario Works to issue my community services money. And long story short, we didn't get the money. We were instructed to start looking for other accommodations, and this is how that all went down. And so what's really interesting is a few weeks later, after the dust settles, all our shit's in storage, we're kind of settled in the hotel room. This is before CIS took the kids. We put in an application at a new place and they wanted first and last. So we put in our request to social services for our first and last. They said, well, you can't have it because you've already gotten it. I'm like, what do you mean we already got it? Sure enough, they had issued the damn check. It was at the front counter. Nobody had called us to tell us it was there, so none of that needed to happen. It took us days to get this all sorted out over there. Excuse me. And by the time that was done, we lost the new place.
Tamara's story is one of the few that didn't result in disastrous destruction of the lives of a whole family. Her family went through the gradual decline in lifestyle from living in a virtual mansion which they owned, through a number of less expensive rental homes, to eventual homelessness and a breakup of the family unit. Fortunately, they managed to get the whole family back together and are presently living in a 2-bedroom apartment, which is inadequate for this family of 6, but at least they have a home and have retained hope that things will improve in time. Their main concern at this point is the results from the traumatic experience on the children. Who knows if they will ever fully recover. Our next guest, David, wasn't nearly as fortunate. Let's hear his story. Hey, David. How you doing?
Not bad.
Sit down.
Not bad.
Yeah. Come on up and have a coffee.
Yeah. Thank you very much. A couple years ago, I was married to a beautiful lady for 28 years. And she left me. Well, I had this accident, car accident. I broke my back. I ripped my hip off my body, and my leg is still destroyed. And I've been in the wheelchair for about 2 years now, and I still can't walk, and I don't know. Whatever.
Where were you living when you were married?
Oh, up in Norland, Ontario.
You have your own house there?
Yes, I did. I worked in Lindsay for a travel trailer business.
Oh, okay.
Fleetwood, Canada.
Oh, yeah.
I worked there for 28 years.
Man, quite a shocking thing to go from having a family and a home and a good job to being homeless.
You think? Yeah, it is.
You've been staying in shelters?
Yes.
What shelter have you been in?
The one down the road there was that Seton.
Seton House?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
better known as Satan House.
oh yeah, it was terrible. It is terrible.
Tell us a bit about how it is in there.
It's hell, man. You want crack cocaine? You go there. It's terrible. I don't even like going there, but I don't have anywhere else to go, you know. Oh, and I got all my clothes were stolen from me.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
That's part of the shelter system.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Yep. Yeah.
All I got is this here pair of pajama bottoms, a shirt, and a coat. That's all I have. Me being in a wheelchair, a lot of guys like to take advantage of me. You know, money-wise, stuff like that, right? I try to go lone wolf.
Yeah.
Well,
Better in a place like that.
Sure it is.
It's almost like being in jail, you know. You're better off to keep your own company.
Yeah, but I think jail sometimes is better.
Yeah, at least you're not sleeping in a room with a whole slew of other people.
Exactly. Snoring, farting, burping.
And bugs.
And bugs, yeah.
You deal a lot with pain?
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I've got back troubles, and I'm on painkillers all the time. What do you use?
Well, I usually have to go to the hospital because I don't have a doctor. Well, I have ODSP.
If you've got ODSP, in your situation in a wheelchair and homeless, they should be able to get you a place to live right away.
Thank you. I thought the same thing, my friend. I have a son, and I worry about him. He's 16.
How old is he? 16, wow.
Yeah.
Tough time to...
Well, he's this close to quitting school.
Yeah.
And I've talked him into staying, but, I mean, I gotta get him.
David's story is more typical of how an average middle-class father can find himself adrift in an alien world simply because he can no longer earn enough to maintain a home. Here is a man who was married for 28 years and has 2 children dependent on him. He worked at the same company for 28 years, but after becoming disabled in a car accident, was no longer able to work to support his family. His 16-year-old son is drifting without his father to give him the guidance he needs in this decisive stage in his life. Anyone who has dealt with chronic pain will attest to the necessity of adequate daily medication, yet there is no doctor to prescribe for him. In cases like this, it is customary for a person who is suffering to turn to street drugs for relief. David should never have been subjected to homelessness, yet here he is. The tragedy continues, and the safety net that is supposed to prevent this from happening has been virtually eliminated. Social assistance has been decimated, effectively making it impossible for a person in this position to pay market rent, which for the worst possible accommodations takes every cent that a person on assistance receives, leaving absolutely nothing to live on. The tragedy continues to the next generation as David's son is on the verge of leaving school, thereby ensuring him of a life of destitution. Let's move on to Cecil's story. Cecil? Good to talk to you.
I fell into a depression and started to use drugs, lost my job, and just gave up. I was sexually abused and poor, and then once you're hungry, you just get stuck in it, right? Walking around like a lost soul, you know what I mean? Just stuck, you know. There's no other word for it, you know what I mean? Just stuck, infested. Everything's bed bug infested, including the shelters, you know what I mean?
Do you have a squad, or do you just sort of move around?
Move around constantly. Yeah, staircases, wherever. At the same time, I take responsibility for my actions, right?
How old is Cecil?
43. 10 years ago, I was living a good life, you know.
Cecil was defeated before he got started. Imagine being shuffled around through 21 foster homes as a child. Imagine being sexually abused in 4 of those dreadful homes. What a terrible childhood to endure. Yet Cecil has tried and will try again to take control of his life. Not so long ago, he was married to a woman he loved. They shared a good home with their 3 children until she passed away from cancer. He worked for 15 years as a printer. During this period of his life, although he had to struggle with the effects of his abusive childhood, he was succeeding as a productive member of the community. The loss of his wife broke Cecil's spirit, and he turned to drugs for relief. Although his health is beginning to deteriorate due to his lifestyle, Cecil, who is 43 years old, hasn't given up. He's committed to getting through this dreadful time and once again becoming a model citizen. He knows there's a good life out there for him, and he intends to go after it.
I'm Carl. Nice to meet you.
So you've been homeless not too long.
This is my 3rd time in 2 years. So I was homeless approximately 2 years ago.
How'd that happen?
I came to Toronto from Ottawa. I lost my job in Ottawa. The company folded. I came here to work. The job didn't pan out, but I had my rent money. My rent money was taken by an unscrupulous landlord. Okay? The fellow that rented to me didn't own the apartment that he rented to. He was just the former tenant who had keys. Right? So he took my first and last and left me without anything. Of course, social assistance couldn't assist me because I had already had $1,600 for rent, right? So they couldn't help me out. So I was left either to a shelter or to my own device, right? So I went to a shelter one night, and after getting infected with something, I left immediately. I don't know whether it was bed bugs, but it was some kind of bug bit me anyway.
Well, most of the shelters are infested with bed bugs.
You don't know who you're sleeping next to, so.
Especially when you put the bed so close together.
So close together, and if you have to sleep on a mat on the floor, right next to somebody,
What kind of work were you doing before this all started?
I was in construction, demolition mostly, and I went to Ottawa, and the company we were doing really well, for a long time. It was good, and then the company folded. I had a friend here who had to connect to a demolition company that renovates big buildings, right? They tear out all the old offices and put new ones in and stuff like that. So complete renovation. And I came down. He's not hiring anymore. He's subbing out his work, so that lead failed. So I was sleeping on the grate over here at Queen and Bay that was warm. And along comes an organization called Streets to Homes.
Oh, I know them. They're pretty good.
Yes, I agree. Their intentions are honorable.
They try, but
yes,
there's not much they can do with
what they have to work with. Exactly. So, but they convinced me to in the fall of that year because I spent all summer here in the square, right? They convinced me in the fall of that year, I think it was 2009 to move into Fred Victor Center, which was a very bad experience for me.
Not much better than shelter.
Well, it's a
High-end shelter.
yeah, pretty much. But the problem is they give you the stability. They give you enough stability to aggravate any condition you might have, like an addiction, or it just it was a perfect setting for me to fall into my own addiction, right, and get settled into it, and it lasted for 5 months. It was terrible, every cent, and being grimy and doing all the things you need to feed your addiction. Nothing got.
No way to put it, because everybody around you is
doing it,
encouraging you to do it so that they can get some of it.
If you don't have any money, they bring you some, right? So it's a bad circle to be in, if you are an addict or a former addict. So it was just bad for me. So I left there and came back to the square.
How did you get into addiction in the first place?
How did I get into it? Since I was a kid, I was a youngster with a full-on addiction. I was like 12 or 13 years old. So it's a lifelong battle for me. So, and it's hard. I've always managed to be functional, right? Up until when you start aging, it's impossible to be functional and still be an addict without it showing, right? And it shows, and it shows in your work, and it shows everything, right?
You're 55 now?
No, I'm 50. So, but I am working with a new group from Streets to Homes. Again, I've just connected with them, so we're going to try a different route this time. Do something in a market rent apartment situation, rather than pure day income.
It might be good to get away from the neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, the neighborhood I was in, getting back to how I became homeless again. Well, I left Fred Victor because it was not a good situation. Come back here, and they convinced me to try a new program that they established, and it was through Wood Green Community Services. And I went to them, and they got me a bachelor apartment in a RGI housing situation, rent here to income. Or it's like $100 a month for the rent. I moved in there a year and a half ago, right? No progress in my life whatsoever. Totally stagnated again. The same thing around the addiction circle, right? Just dancing around that circle again. I can't be close to or involved with, especially where my housing is concerned, people with addictions, right? Because we feed each other, we support each other.
Been through that, the whole revolving door process.
Yes, it's around the circle, right? Like here, I stay clean.
Have you tried any rehab?
I've been to every rehab in Ontario. I believe it. I've tried other provinces as well, and rehab is not the problem, right? It's my environment, right? I need to get environmentally sound housing.
Up until recently, Carl was doing well. He had managed to control his addiction sufficiently to function relatively well as a middle-class citizen. Now at age 50, he is finding it more difficult. He is a construction worker and was successfully employed in Ottawa and leading a normal middle-class life. During the recession, his company closed down and he became unemployed. He was led to believe there was a job for him in Toronto. So he came here only to learn that other arrangements had been made and he didn't have a job to go to after all. He managed to find an apartment, and Ontario Works advanced him enough to pay first and last month rent. But the person renting the apartment was not the owner, and Carl was defrauded out of the rent money and forced into homelessness. Workers from Streets to Homes, a program designed to help homeless people find housing, placed him in one housing project after another, where most of the other tenants were active addicts, who lured him into using drugs almost continuously. In each case, in order to escape the drugs, he left and went back to living on the streets, where he is more able to control his problem. I can relate to this because twice I had to leave similar situations and go back to homelessness in order to escape the constant pressure from other tenants to use ever more drugs. He is currently seeking an affordable apartment where the other tenants are not mostly addicts. Once he is housed, he will be welcomed back to his part-time job as an outreach worker and will be able to begin the process of rebuilding his life, provided he can locate a suitable apartment.
Well, I was hired by a law firm in 2007, which was a barrier breaker because I never worked in that environment. So I had two good years there. A lot of it was very stimulating, but it's like the fancy world of lawyers, so it was a lot of pressure all the time. And due to the recession 2 years later, I lost my job. So, life can just go downfall so easily. So because I supported my son, but eventually my son wanted to live somewhere else. So I had no point to pay a spacious 2-bedroom for $1,100 monthly. So and I contacted my landlord, what can be done, and no response. So I lost my social housing status.
Oh.
And then when
How
I
old
lost
is your
my
son?
job, my son is 22.
Okay.
Yeah. When I lost my job, it would have been handy to get my rent got back, but by then I wasn't there anymore. So yeah.
That's painful. I mean,
Yeah.
and then, so basically, even though you were on assisted housing, when you went off assisted housing, you go back to the bottom of the list to get back on.
Exactly.
So you don't get any preference at
No,
all.
because my landlord said if I reapply within a year, they reassess me, and it never happened. So I just lost my status fully. Yeah.
And you reapplied within a year?
Oh yes. Yeah,
And they didn't
right away.
reassess you?
No. I learned about the second career program, so they paid the first year tuition and living allowance. But ironically, the second year they broke the contract, so they didn't pay the tuition as it is in the contract. So I had to top it up with OSAP money. So now I'm in serious debt just to be able to finish my second year. But I finished, so.
And,
Yeah.
and what was that?
George Brown 2-year program of a community worker. We have a new mayor who doesn't care about social services, and all the programs and services are cut back brutally. I even at my placement, I learned how people are unable to get sessions from employment resource centers. So no services. So it's upsetting because I really put my heart and soul into social justice and helping people, because I know where it comes from and how it feels. Yeah.
You did, as part of the program, you actually worked in a shelter.
Yes, I worked at St. Simon's, and I learned to talk to those people, great people, lovely people, and I also ran my own art class for them. Yeah.
Well, you've got a situation where you had a good job and a beautiful apartment. You went through a stage of losing your job due to the recession. You went back to school, went into debt to get training to find another employment, and come out with really no hope of employment in that field. Then what happened?
Well, my life had an unfortunate turn as my relationship became, like, my partner became like aggressive. I didn't know that, and well, as it started, I told myself there's no hope here, so I had to stop it. I'm not a type of a person putting up with it and accept people's apologies once they are aggressive. That's the real person. So I had to stop it, and I had to kick him out, and it was very difficult. But now I'm finding myself in another tough situation.
How's that?
the court and the police advised me that I have to give up my apartment because he can come back.
Why were the court and the police involved? What happened there?
Well, there was a police report because he became aggressive and I reported him.
Okay, so he actually threatened you? Is that what happened?
Yeah, he became violent. So I had to stop it. Yeah.
So the police advised you to leave your home.
Yeah.
And where did you go?
Well, ironically, it took me 14 days to find a shelter and unable to stay at my apartment. So that was like 2 weeks of bitter betweenness and fear, and I asked friends if I can stay. Because I was advised to go to a homeless shelter, but they said they might not be able to provide enough services and counseling for my case, which I see, and it's really harsh. They provide no assistance. So that's where my struggle is, because for housing connections, I'm entitled and eligible for priority housing.
Can you explain what that is?
Priority housing is that when you are on the waiting list, instead of years, they should be responsible to find you housing as soon as possible. And I went to Housing Connections to change my application from a regular one to get my priority status recognized, and they kicked me out. They said I don't have a base. And I had my police report, I have the court decision, I have the victims unit letter. They said that's not enough evidence. So the housing worker in the shelter shoved it to my face that she's not putting a supportive letter together because she doesn't know me.
What's that got to do with anything? She doesn't have to know you to take the facts and report them, which is what her job is.
Yeah.
So you've been put into a position from being initially a very responsible single mother working at a good job, went through a process of losing the job through the recession, going to school and having them break their contracts, so you had to go into debt to complete your school.
Yep.
Finding out at the end of it all that the new administration is cutting back and there are no jobs in that field, to winding up in a dangerous situation where your life has been threatened to the degree that the police press charges.
Yes.
And there is no support coming from the people who are being paid to support.
That's right. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That is shocking.